You're listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 99. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how to stop over drinking in 90 days without missing out on life. If you're not an alcoholic, but fed up with saying yes to a drink when you mean to say no, you're in the right place. Okay, so Mary, thank you very much for joining me here today to talk on the 90 Days Later podcast. It's so lovely to have you as a guest. And so first, I'd really just like to start
lovely to be here.
All right, brilliant. Maybe you could just start by just introducing yourself so people know who you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Mary Reid. I'm the Executive Director of Moderation Management, otherwise known as MM. Moderation Management is a peer support group for people that want to moderate or reduce their drinking or change their drinking in towards a healthier relationship with alcohol.
Perfect. And I love that you say it's peer support, right? Because it's moderated, but we've got the peer people in there. So why moderation management? Why did you get involved in this? And what does this mean for you?
Well, like most of all of our administration, I came to MM as a member. I came to MM as a person who was struggling with their drinking. I had heard about it back in the early 90s when it first came around. And I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. Mm-hmm. But back then, internet was not a big deal. I mean, it wasn't really on the scene yet, and there wasn't a whole lot of online groups. So I would finally, I'd always worried about my drinking. I think I worried about it from the time I had my first hangover, which was right after my first drink. Yeah. And then, so when this came about, and of course, like everybody else, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my drinking. I need to go totally abstinent, go to AA. So all of a sudden, this woman started appearing on the TV shows here about moderation management on a lot of the talk shows. And I thought, oh, wow, I can do that. Great. I can still drink. And so I went to our little local library. I lived in a small town and checked out the book. And I don't remember what the book was called back then, Moderate Drinking or something. Uh-huh. And but the problem was then there were no meetings, and there was, other than the book, there wasn't a whole lot of support out there. And there were a few meetings maybe in New York City or, San Francisco or something. But as far as in a small town in Kansas, there was no actual one-on-one support available. So fast forward about 20 years, and now my drinking has really escalated. I'm drinking heavily every day, showing some, I'll get the shakes in the morning sometimes when I wouldn't drink. So it was worrisome. Yeah. So again, I thought I've got to do something about this. And I decided that, I knew I probably needed to abstain. I really thought I did at this point, as heavy as I was drinking. Mm-hmm. So I went and I thought, I had started blogging about I was living on a sailboat at that time. So I had started a blog about my sailboat life and blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, I'm going to go see if there's any online communities out there for drinking. And so, of course, I went to AA first, but I had a real problem with meetings. I just knew that was one thing I couldn't do. I understood. I've never been a meeting person. Mm-hmm. It was an obstacle for me, but I still wanted help. And so I went to their online forum or message board and say, hey, this is me. Hello. I really want to quit drinking or reduce my drinking, but I don't want to go to meetings. And the first thing I got was, well, if you don't want to go to meetings, then you don't want this bad enough, which was quite of the message back then that AA had sent out, which I think they've changed since then. It was kind of like, if you want it bad enough, you'll show up here mm-hmm. when you need it bad enough, when you're desperate enough. So I skirted around some more. I think I might have looked into Smart Recovery, which is also an abstinence-based group, but they're a little more tolerant of people that want to reduce their drinking. Again, I still wasn't ready to abstain. Our whole life my husband and I's relationship revolved around drinking. So I thought, I'm going to see if MM's out there anywhere. So I went and looked for Moderation Management's online community and found it. They found a forum. And first I posted, told them who I was, what I was doing. And the only thing they came back and said, basically, we're just glad you're here. So doesn't have a program. Didn't have a program back then. It didn't have steps, and we were just people that were worried about our drinking, didn't want to quit, and we're offering each other support.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at MM.
Wow. And that's so you had the early days, and you came round to the later days, and now you've got more involved. And with a sailboat in between, I had no idea. I want to ask you all about that, but I'll probably save that for another time. So you talked there about AA and abstinence and so on. And I even think today, in 2023, because I'm dealing a lot, obviously, with people who want to change their relationship with alcohol, and they don't always know what that means. They just know that what's happening isn't working. And even myself, as well, I see this so much sort of from the coach's angle, there seems to be this real fat line in the sand between, the moderation really, I hear this so often, it's just not possible. Abstinence is the only way. If you don't want to become sober, if you have any kind of problem with alcohol, you just got to go sober. So even now, all these years later, so what are your thoughts on this? I mean, is this something, do people come to you with that concern, and so they sort of feel like they've come home when they find moderation management? Tell me about that.
I think we're of an age. I've seen so much change. I came to MM in 2010, so I've been there about 13 years, and I've seen a lot of change in that time in the movement towards harm reduction and accepting moderation as an option or reduction. And before that, we were all kind of grown up with AA. Basically, like I said, I had this belief at 20 years old, if I worried about my drinking at all, and I'm a nurse, so I had gone through the classes, I'd gone to AA meetings as part of my training, and I knew back then the big thing was, if you're worried at all and you just can't cut down, then you need to go to AA. That's your only choice. You're an alcoholic. And so that's what we grew up believing. Now, I think now there's a little more. You're seeing the sober curious movement. You're seeing all that. So I don't think people have that ingrained in their head as much as when we were, I won't say growing up, but in the before 1990 anyway. So definitely back then, there's still I see a lot of the older generation, 60s, 70s, 50s, that still believe that, and they'll come to MM, but they don't classify themselves as an alcoholic, because they say, I'm not laying on the street drinking out of a brown paper bag, and I held a job, and I'm doing all these things, so I'm not an alcoholic. I just want to stop my drinking, because if I was an alcoholic, I have to go to AA. So I think what that does is it delays, just like me when I was 20 or 30 years old. And said, I have a problem that I'm not going to quit. It delayed until my problem got worse, and until where I got to the point where I was drinking daily, where it was to a point that I really couldn't stop, and I was starting to see physical dependency. So it delayed that belief that we have to wait. Now, do people moderate? I came to MM. I'll tell you a little bit more about my story later. I did end up going abstinent for 8 years, and then decided to explore moderation again. And I'm succeeding at it. I learned that I was a different person, and I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I have learned the skills, and I learned how to use my tools. So people come and they find out they can, or else they go back to abstinence. We have a lot of people that have been in AA for 20 some years, and all of a sudden I always envisioned, because I have a brother who's been in AA probably 40 years. Once they're in AA, they're so happy to never go back out. They're happy with their lives. They're happy that they're not drinking. But I've discovered that's not the truth. And so we get these people that come, and then they struggle, and then they decide, it's just not worth it. I was happy enough abstaining. Or we get the people that do very well, because they started abstaining when they were in their 20s and 30s, and they've grown up, and they're totally different people than when they had the drinking problem back then.
Right. I mean, I think it's just so great that, and this is one of the things I've heard from my clients, that there are options out there. There are many, many options out there. It's not kind of just AA, because there's, and if that's for some, if they want that, that's great. If that's not what they want, there's something for them. But so what does drinking in moderation mean for you, Mary? How would you define that?
Well, my goal is actually to stick to MM guidelines, which is 9 drinks a week for women, no more than 3 a night, and 3 to 4 abstinent days a week. I don't always get that, but I get close. Men's is 16, no more than 16 drinks a week, no more than 4 in a night. Now, I'm kind of at the point, of course, that doesn't go along with the different countries' guidelines.
Right.
At one time, the U.S. is this National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and they at one time matched up with MM. We were the same, and then they reduced the women down to 7 and no more than 1 a day, and MM didn't reduce. Canada is kind of looking at even more stringent. I'm not sure where UK is right now on that, but I think the guidelines also put a hurdle up for people because they look at those guidelines and while they're trying to achieve those, they're making great progress in reducing their drinking and their lifestyle but they're beating themselves up because they're not by the guidelines. So we all know that there's no healthy level of drinking. Moderation is not the healthiest level of drinking. There is no benefit to drinking moderately as far as physical health goes. So we're not going to put that argument out there. But there are other parameters, other than strict guidelines to look at as far as your health levels. Like today, I had lab work about 2 weeks ago, and you look at that, you look in and make sure that your lab work's coming back okay, your liver profile is okay, you look at whether your relationships are okay, your work, your productivity. There are other things to look at when you're working on reducing your drinking that also add up to success, whether you meet the guidelines or not.
I love what you say there, right? Because beating ourselves up if we don't achieve something is only going to make ourselves feel bad. And then, hey, presto, where do we end up then? Then you're back into the drink. Well, I might as well drink because I didn't manage to do it, and now I'm feeling awful. So to have some kind of guideline, just to know, and again, just to know that this option is there, and if it's what you want for your lifestyle. But let's talk about other people, as in people who aren't signed up to whatever it is we want to do with our drinking. Because one of the things I hear again and again is one of my clients, they'll say they're just trying to drink less, and maybe they have a couple of drinks and they go out with their gang, their people who are quite heavy drinkers, and they turn the third down, right? So they're drinking, they're not abstaining, and then they feel kind of like everybody piles on. What's going on? You're so boring. Why aren't you drinking? And this whole thing. And that, I find, keeps so many people in, beyond moderation, keeps them in the habit that they don't want to be. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something, that you see? You're smiling.
Well, I think, if with our society anymore, if you go just say, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, and then everybody would go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. And then you wouldn't have to answer any more questions. But I think, that's a good excuse, though, to say, I'm doing it for my health. I just felt like I was drinking too much and I wasn't sleeping well at night. You can be honest, but you don't have to tell them the whole story. You can just say, I just feel like it's, I'm not sleeping well. I don't have the energy I want. So I'm just going to reduce a little bit. Yeah. And if they keep at it, then it's like, it's really none of your business. And I'm not asking you to do anything about your drinking. And the thing is, friends get used to that. I found before I abstained, before I actually chose to abstain, I was a year with MM. And like I said, I was drinking heavily, very heavily. And so it was hard to get those numbers down. And I didn't want to abstain, but MM, really encourages abstinence as part of the moderation journey. And at that time, we really pushed our 30. So as getting a 30 days abstinence in right away. And I'd attempted that, never made one in the first year. I probably attempted 6 of them. And I'd get to about day 20. And then I'd go back to drinking the way I was. Because we didn't have programs. We didn't really have tools. We do no longer push the 30 because we realize that that also keeps people from reaching out to help because they think, oh, there's no way I can do it 30 days. Right. So anyway, but by the time I chose to go abstinence, my friends were used to me saying, oh, I'm not drinking tonight. Oh, I'm taking a break. And, the first few times, even when I said I'm abstaining for good or for the foreseeable future, they say, oh, yeah, she does this all the time. She'll be back drinking. So after a while, it becomes old news with your friends, and as long as you're not telling them how to drink, they quit noticing it,
Yeah,
So
that's a good way of thinking it. Oh, it does become, oh, we say in the UK, it's tomorrow's fish and chip paper, right? It was in the newspaper yesterday. Now you're eating the chips out of it. No one cares. But it's great to hear you say that, because again, I think that keeps so many people back. They think, well, if everybody around me supported me, then I'd be able to do it. But then you've been waiting forever, because you never get to control what anyone, and like you say, you're in dangerous territory when you start telling other people how to drink, and that's not how you want to be. So you spoke earlier about, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to clarify. I knew that when my husband still drank heavily, all of my friends still drank heavily, and I knew that when I decided whatever path I was going to end up on, I knew that I was still going to be with these people. So I better be able to do what I wanted to do while they were doing it around me. And I'll have to say, none of them changed their drinking in the 8 years that I abstained. They had no problems drinking around me. So I was a designated driver. So they were happy for that. So.
Oh, they were happy. But that's interesting that you added that, because it kind of segues into what I want to chat about next, which is, I think when we change our relationship with alcohol, whatever that means, even if we reduce a little bit, if we abstain, if we find we have a community of people who understand us, and whatever that is, that it can change how we see ourselves. It doesn't just change what we do, but how we feel about ourselves. What's your reaction to that?
While we're still problem drinking, or once we reach out for help?
Either. Well, when we reach out for help, when we start to see that we're able to do this, and when we decide we want to change our relationship with alcohol, and then we start to see that our life changes too, and how we see ourselves. Okay. I mean, that's the critical thing here, how we see ourselves and our abilities.
Well, I know, I guess I worried about my drinking, but it didn't ever seem like all my friends who also drank, maybe not as heavily as I did, but, definitely daily or every time we were out, they never seemed to worry about it, or we never talked about it, and then we never sat around and say, oh my gosh, we really need to quit drinking. It was not a subject we talked about. And when people would come in after the weekend and come into work and then laugh about how hungover they were, I would just look at them and say, how can they laugh about that? I feel so much shame about it. So there was this whole thing that was a big secret with me that I thought I was hiding from everybody, just how bad I drank. And so when I finally got to a community, and believe me, I'm not a support person. I don't go to therapy. I don't do anything. You should be able to fix it yourself, Mm-hmm. So when I finally went to a community and I heard all these people that were talking about all the worries that I had, I finally felt I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And it didn't matter what story I had to tell. And we didn't really go down the rabbit hole of telling horror stories or anything like that. But, somebody was there to say, yeah, me too. I've done that too. And it took a lot of the shame away. And so then as you move through, you begin to feel, and I felt it both in abstinence. And then again, when I started moderating, powerful, and not because all of a sudden I realized it isn't just about saying I'm only going to drink 3 drinks tonight and that's it. I'm drinking. You got to learn how to change your thinking about drinking. You've got to learn how to change how you drink. You can't just focus on those numbers, because all of a sudden those 3 drinks are gone and you're sitting there and what else is there for you to do? So it's a lot of growth, and you've got to be willing to make other changes, not total lifestyle changes, but changes in how you do things and how you look at drinking and what you expect from drinking. I always tell that when anybody comes from a long period of abstinence back to moderation, I think we still have that little light bulb in our brain that lights up every time we think about, I'm going to get to feel this and this, but there'll be no consequences. And it's not that. If you're moderating, you really don't get to feel that. Everybody's always looking for that sweet spot, but the point is to stay away from the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. So you have to learn those techniques, and learning that and actually seeing them work makes you feel like you can apply that to other parts of your life.
Yeah, I love that you use the word there, powerful, that you feel powerful, that you can do this, right? Because we can make these changes and still have the life. And I say apply it to other pieces of our life. And then we start to see what we're capable of, and just getting some kind of a handle on this, so that it's not this shameful thing. It's just something we do. And hey, we can change it if we want to, and we can drink in this way or drinking that way. So now I know you have many resources available at Moderation Management. You have all sorts of programs and things for people. How can people best get involved with if they're listening to this today?
I think it depends on the person themselves and their individual likes. Like you said, I had a big my obstacle was going to meetings as far as AA. So if I jumped into a lot of people would say, "Oh, go to a meeting. That's what you need." That would have turned me off right away. I'm a person that likes to write and read a lot. So I would join, depending on who you are. If you feel comfortable with a meeting and you can join a meeting and just listen. You don't have to talk. You can get in there and ask questions, and you're going to find out that we're all the same as you. Now, I always tell people, newcomers, you'll hear us complaining like, "Oh my gosh, I drank 4 last night," or "I drank 5," and a lot of newcomers, I would have said, "I don't belong here." If people are only drinking 4 or 5, I would have been happy with that when I first came to MM. I wouldn't have been in MM to begin with. So those are those of us that have been there a while. And so keep that in mind. And we do have a meeting during the day that actually started out for our UK members, because we do have a few UK members on Wednesdays that I lead. Actually, it's kind of a mixed bag. We actually still get a few UK members, but we get one from Poland. We get mostly of US or Canadian still, but it is in the time slot. It would be at 8:00 on Wednesday, at 8:00 in the evening for UK time. And we have a few other daytime meetings that are available. But if you're not there, a lot of people join our Facebook group, which I think is great.
This is fantastic.
But yeah, it is a good group, but it doesn't offer the sense of community, close community that I found when I came to MM, because it's so big. And there's new people joining all the time. So it's kind of just like get in there and find out that there's actually support. We have our listserv and our forum, which have kind of dwindled in numbers and activity, but they're still there, and they're very small groups. You can use a username. No one ever has to know who you are, which we can't manage that on a Facebook private group. So, and they all just kind of know each other. They become friends, kind of like our meetings when you have our regulars at meetings. So I would go there. Especially the forum has a lot of old threads that you can read through, for years, that you can see people discussing things. And then, of course, our website at moderation.org. Our handbook is responsible drinking. It's old, but it only comes out in workbook form. It's not on an ebook form, but it's still very pertinent. So it doesn't, I just reread it again for our book club, and everything, struggling with drinking hasn't changed that much.
No.
So, and then we do offer programs now that, like I said, we didn't have programs back then. We didn't say take steps, and we still don't say that. We say find the step that you feel you're capable of succeeding at. That's the big thing. But we have our Kickstart program, which introduces tools and just some of the thoughts behind moderation management with daily emails. We do offer that. And then we have a new program this month called Miles for Moderation, which also combines very moderate physical activity goals along with moderation goals. So we're having fun with that. It's really kind of like just getting out there and learning to enjoy. It shouldn't be a burden. So, and those are all at moderationmonth.org. Wow. So 2 different websites, but you can find the links to them on our moderation.org site.
And I'll include all those links in the show notes for the podcast episode as well. Okay. So everybody can get that. So someone's listening to this and they think they're fine, but they're worried about their partner, their husband, wife, friends, or whatever. What would you say to them? How can they best support that person? This is a tricky one. I know I get asked this a lot, so I'm interested in your view on this.
It is tricky because I think also our partners come with the idea that I just want you to quit drinking and all of our problems will be solved. Unfortunately, we don't have that many resources for them at MM, because we tried a partners meeting where the couples came together and kind of discussed things, and it just never got off the ground. I think it'd be great if we had a spouse or partner meeting just for the spouses and partners. I've been on both sides of the fence, so I'd like to do that, but it's just I can't take on another meeting right now. But we do have our newcomers meeting every twice a month. Actually, I think one's coming up next Thursday, not this Thursday, where people can get in and ask questions about moderation management and find out more about it. The other thing you can do, you can always read whatever resources they have. If your partner's reading Responsible Drinking,
Right.
you can read up on that. You can read on the research studies. The truth is, and I know you, Anna, you looked into research over there in the UK, but in the United States, only about 20% of people that struggle with alcohol will reach out for any kind of support. And mainly that is because they think they're going to be told they have to go to a 12-step or a rehab program and abstain. So, and out of that 20%, only 5 to 7% will actually succeed at abstaining for a period of time, a lengthy period of time. So, thinking that abstinence is the only absence is the only solution has really kept the door shut for people reaching out for help. So, and MM actually in other programs, they kind of open that door, and it actually gets you more comfortable. It gets you comfortable with abstinence. I chose abstinence after a year and was very happy with it for 8 years. It was a gift. It really was for me. So.
And I think you're right. So it is startling, the statistics that we have on this. And just again, when people find me, when they come to me, they say, I'm so relieved I can talk about this with somebody. I don't talk about this because I just don't want AA. I don't want anyone to think that I don't think I've got this massive problem. I just think I need to do something about it. In the same way, as you say, that we might want to lose weight, we might want to get nutrition, we might want to get fit, we might want to learn how to landscape our garden, and we look for help with those things, right? We don't expect ourselves to be experts. So that's why I love the open conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, talking about your story, talking about MM. And for everybody listening, it's not just me beating this drum with this whole organization. There's lots and lots of help out there. So finally, Mary, what would you say to someone who's listening to this, who really is worried about their drinking? What would you say to them right now?
I think what I would ask them to do is if you're worried about your drinking, realize that you're not alone, and realize that you do not, at the very beginning, have to take steps that are going to be uncomfortable for you mentally or physically. You can address your drinking problem at a small step at a time and make it doable. And a lot of times that will bring more success than jumping on. I know how many mornings I woke up every morning for years, probably, said, I'm not drinking today. And then, noon rolled around or 3:00 rolled around, and that went, and then I just beat myself up, and thought, okay. So it was too big a step to take. And so there are so many other steps you can take. First one is just to find out how much you are drinking and be honest about it without any shame. And then take small steps in reducing that amount. Do not, if you are drinking daily and have been for a while, do not try to abstain completely without any medical supervision. It's dangerous. And so, you can do it with small steps. It takes time. It takes a lot of, we always say, we call it the MM shuffle. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Most of us have been drinking a long time. So we have to kind of retrain our brains and learn all kinds of new skills.
Yeah. And it might not feel as grandiose. It might not be, I've got, 18 days alcohol free or whatever. But I tell you what, in those 18 days, if you make other changes that stick, that are more likely to stick, I think one of the big things is being able just to decide. I can decide how much I drink. No one's telling me I have to abstain. No one's telling me that it's this much. And it's all down to me. Back up, you were talking earlier about feeling powerful. Once we then start to feel more control, that can be a huge thing. Is there anything else I haven't asked that you want to say before we close out here?
I think we covered most of it. I just again, don't be too concerned about where you're going to end up. Just worry about taking that first step, and don't worry so much about it. Just find one you can take. Even if it's just reducing by half a drink a day, and keeping at that for a week, or even maintaining and just keeping steady where you are for right now, and then getting to where okay, now I'm ready to reduce by 1 drink, or just by my biggest tool is I make every drink last an hour. I'm a big believer in how we drink is as important as how much we drink. So if you go in, I could drink 3 drinks a night, but if I drink those down fast, I'm going to be drunk, and I'm probably not going to push that stop button. So you've got to learn how to drink. And sometimes that's easier to face, saying, okay, I just got to slow down a little bit and notice how fast I'm drinking these. That's an easier first step for a lot of people to take and say, okay, I've already got to start reducing by one. So it's finding that step that you can do. So, and finding support. You won't be judged. You won't be told you have to do this. You won't be told, you know what, you really should abstain. We don't do that. We're very strict about that at MM. If somebody does do that, they get their hands slapped pretty quickly.
Fantastic. All right, brilliant. Thank you again so much, Mary, for being on, and for everybody.
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome. So everybody listening, so I will put the details for Moderation Management in the show notes. It is a terrific organization, and I've been to some of their meetings and involved in some of their stuff, and it is incredibly supportive. And I think that's what we need. We need support, not shame, when it comes to drinking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around, and they don't miss out on life. And we do it in 90 days. The effect is permanent. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.